Creepy guy tried to follow me home from a restaurant. I'm a super aware person. Always taught to keep my head on a swivel, and thank God for that. My son, 2 years old, and I went to this local bar and grill, where I used to work, to have lunch and visit my friend who was working there. My son and I were just playing with his Hot Wheels and waiting for our food. This gentleman came up and just started staring at me and my son, and didn't say anything. I'm used to people coming up and admiring my son, he's adorable, but this was weird. I asked if I could help him, but he didn't speak great English, but I managed to decipher what he was saying. He asks if I'm married and I said yes, plus I have my kid with me and I'm noticeably pregnant. He then tells me he's divorced and it's been hard. And then tells me I'm beautiful like 5 times. I say thanks and our food finally comes. He's still just standing at our table while we prepare to eat. I just look at him and he finally walks off. My son and I eat, I pay and say bye to my friend. As I'm walking out the door, I notice him following us slowly. I get to my car and try to get my son in his car seat as quick as I can while I'm watching him get closer and closer. I finally get him buckled in and then bam, he's standing right behind me. He held out his hand and tried to hand me $1 and I asked what is this, and he said his phone number. I then told him I didn't want it and retold him I was married and I'm never ever going to call him. He kept insisting, so I took the $1 and threw it in the back seat and told him to leave. I get in my car, lock the doors, collect myself and start to back out. As I'm going through the parking lot, I see him in his car waiting for me to leave so he can follow me. I jet out on the busy street trying to lose, but he kept up right behind me. Obviously I don't want to drive home, my husband's out of town and I don't want this guy knowing where I live. So I start heading to my parents', where I had already called my dad and gave him a heads up to meet me outside with his gun. He's still riding my ass at this point and we get to a roundabout, so I just kept going around and so did he. More cars eventually started filling in the roundabout to where he wasn't directly behind me and I pulled off to my parents' street. I looked behind me and he had started following a car that looked similar to mine, but I finally had gotten him off my tail. I nearly got kidnapped in the middle of a restaurant, so I used to work in a museum that closed fairly late. During summer we'd be open till 10 p.m., and living in the capital city I unfortunately had to always pass very crowded places in order to get home. This happened when I stopped to get some food in a restaurant near a shopping center on my way home. As I left the tram, a guy immediately stopped me to ask for a donation. We had a very short conversation, but before we finished, 2 guys, seemingly older than me, I was 20, they could have been like 30, that both had a very large, muscular build, stopped by and started asking me weird questions. They were both holding beers, but neither of them acted drunk per se. Which means they were creeps by nature. At first they commented on my blue hair, telling me how much they loved it, which is fine. Then they asked if the guy that was still awkwardly standing there was my brother, so on. Thankfully they left soon after. I made my donation and started making my way towards the restaurant again. I didn't notice them at first due to the place being overcrowded, but right in front of the restaurant they stopped me again. This time their questions got a lot creepier. They asked if I'd be willing to perform all kinds of sexual acts on them since they're here to have fun, and I was apparently very attractive to them. They kept being awfully pushy, saying I should suck one of them off right on the spot. I tried to walk away, but they just blocked my path. Then they asked me for my number. Me being anxious and hoping they'll just let me go if I obey, I gave it to them, and indeed, they let me pass. As soon as I entered the restaurant I started getting spam calls, so I immediately blocked their numbers. I messaged my boyfriend asking him to pick me up. I don't think I ever felt that scared. Planning to stay inside the restaurant till my BF comes didn't work out, however, as one of them later literally entered the completely full restaurant, came up to me and started inappropriately touching me, hugging me, and even tried to kiss me. I was so dumb that I didn't scream or anything. I just tried to push him away, but otherwise I was just frozen in place and insanely scared due to his large build. It's insane to me that I clearly tried fighting him off, as everyone around us just looked away or silently watched. I even let out "help" and "stop" a couple of times. Clearly he got tired of that and decided to take it one step further, by literally dragging me out full force. I felt like at that point I'll just get kidnapped and no one's gonna do anything. Thankfully, After all the time, a group of girls I never met before entered the restaurant and said something along the lines of me having to go because we all have plans for the evening together, and thank God he just let go and left without a word. It baffles me that I could have gotten kidnapped or God knows what else in the middle of a place completely full of people. And needless to say, I hugged those girls like I've never hugged anyone before and left them only like half an hour later when my BF finally came, left my job and literally never returned to that place, being awfully paranoid even now 2 years later. Sex offender owned a restaurant I frequented as a teenager, used it to groom girls. When I was 15 to 17 I lived in a pretty small city with not a lot of things to do. I often went to what excuse for a downtown we had, and one of the two places I frequented was a small Lebanese restaurant that I loved because it was cheap enough for a 15-year-old to enjoy, and the owner remembered me as a regular, and that was cool. I brought my friends all the time. The owner would give me hugs or give me dessert. And drinks on the house. Whatever, free stuff is great. One time I go in with a friend, he comes out and asks me if he can take a photo with me. I say sure. In the photo he's sitting beside me and hugging me. Really leaning into me. I post it on Instagram because at this point it's kind of a joke between my close friends and I that this 60-something Lebanese man is my friend. I literally captioned it "me and my best friend." Another friend comments "so good." One of my best friends messages me the same day and tells me it looks like he's groping me in the photo. I say no way. I still have the photo, and looking at it right now creeps me the fuck out. Super gropey. Sometime after we take that photo, maybe my next visit, he tells me I should leave a resume and I can work at the cafe. I had never had a real job before, and this idea of independence at my favorite restaurant was super exciting. I go home and tell my dad. He says no way, and that man is a total creep. Doesn't trust him at all. My dad's fiancée brushes it off like I did and says something like, "Oh, he's a friendly old Lebanese man. They're just like that." I guess she finally convinced my dad it wasn't that big a deal because I made a shitty resume and gave it to one of the waitresses there but never heard back. She probably threw it out, and I'm really grateful she did. Less than a year ago he was sentenced to a 90-day intermittent jail sentence and 3 years probation for raping a girl under 16. She had the same story, groomed and asked to work for him. He drove her home from work regularly and he got her drunk. As of right now his jail sentence is over. But during it he was allowed to continue working on the weekends. His lawyer convinced the judge that a fall in 2004 led to such mental impairment that he poorly judged the situation that led to raping a child, and it was a one-off event. If that waitress didn't throw my resume away, it could have been me. Very easily. When news broke that he was convicted, a couple of my friends sent me links to the story. It was nauseating. The more I think about this story as an adult, the more it makes me ill. Certainly not a one-off event. Followed after creepy encounter at restaurant. This was a few years back. At the time, I was 17F and my little sister was 13F. I had just gotten a car, so my little sister and I decided to go out for lunch and shop. We went to a Jason's Deli down the street from a Target, and went inside to eat. After ordering, we sat down a couple tables down from a family. There was a 12 years old or so girl at the table. I noticed this guy at the other side of the restaurant watching her. This guy had no food or drink, just sitting alone at the table. It freaked me out, but I just kept on doing my thing. After a while, the family left, and I noticed the guy had started eyeing my sister and I. I didn't want to worry her, and I'm known to overreact a little. So I just kept an eye on him while we ate. He sat there the entire time, never moving and constantly watching us. Once we were done eating, we got up and walked to my car. We got in my car, and as I was setting up my music, the guy walked out and got into a truck a couple cars down from us. I thought it was odd, so I decided to drive through a big parking lot in front of a Joann's instead of taking the short way around to Target to make sure he wasn't following us. Basically, this way was super illogical to get to any of the exits of the shopping area. Sure enough, after I drove behind him towards the parking lot, he pulled out of his spot and followed us. I took a few weird turns through the parking lot, and he continued to follow. I exited the shopping center and turned onto Main Road, and he followed. Now, I've always been told to take 4 left turns or 4 right turns to see if someone is following you. So I did. Sure enough, he just kept following. Finally, I told my sister about him and she was trying to get his plates. We reached the access road to the highway, back next to the Jason's Deli. I decided to cut across the road to get to another highway, confusing, but basically I had to go through 3 lanes of traffic. I got to the other side and he was trying to follow, but almost hit someone and got stuck. I drove my sister down that highway for about 5 minutes before we pulled off and took a long way home. He never showed back up and we only got the first few letters of his plate, but my sister and I were freaked out for a while after that. It definitely was a formative experience for the both of us to keep an eye out and trust our guts.